The G8 is the group of 8 of the world's largest economies: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia, and Canada. Every year since 1975, the heads of state of the G8 nations gather at an annual summit whose location rotates among the G8 member nations. The G8 gather ostensibly to discuss and search for solutions on the pressing social issues of the day, such as climate change, world poverty, the AIDS crisis, third world debt, and war. But since the G8's solutions are discussed in such relative isolation from the public, and are premised on how to maintain the status quo of privilege for the richest nations in the world, the G8 has come under increasing criticism and even protest. The dam of protest burst in the late 90s, when thousands of protesters gathered in Birmingham, England in 1998, and in Cologne, Germany in 1999, in the sort of large-scale protest that presaged the multi-coalition international-scale protests like those against the World Trade Organization in Seattle in late 1999. The G8 in 2001 met in Genoa, Italy, and in the course of the public protests there, the Italian military police killed one protester, Carlo Giuliani, whose martyrdom at the G8 amplified rallying cries against the G8. Since those pre-9/11 days of protesting summits, the G8 have responded not by addressing public grievances, but by running away, often holding summits in increasingly hard-to-reach locales. Hard to reach, that is, for grassroots political activists. But activists still try, and nevertheless gather in large numbers in nearby locales. In 1997, after the G8 summit in Denver, Colorado, rumors circulated that the G8 summit was slated to come to Chicago. William Daley, then Secretary of Commerce for then-President Clinton, and brother of then-Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley, was supposedly leading the lobbying charge. But something happened between the 1997 Denver summit and the 2004 summit: the war in Iraq, and specific to Chicago, the occupation of the Lakeshore Drive Highway by tens of thousands of anti-war activists. That Lakeshore Drive protest only lasted one evening, but got prime-time international television attention. The G8 usually announce the location of their next summit shortly after a given G8 summit ends, but in 2003, at the conclusion of the G8 summit in Evian, France, the G8 waited a month and a half before announcing that Sea Island, Georgia, an exclusive resort on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, would host the 2004 G8. As the Wall Street Journal reported, quote, "Georgia said Sea Island has been chosen to host the G8 summit in line with recent venues from which protesters can be kept easily," unquote. The G8 would return to the United States in 2012, and on June 22, 2011, the Obama White House confirmed what was long rumored: that Chicago would serve as the host of the 2012 G8 summit, to be held in May 2012. Were they thinking that with the war in Iraq ostensibly over, the large anti-war protests like those on Lakeshore Drive were no longer a factor, or that the days of the big G8 protests before 9/11 were a thing of the past? Whatever they were thinking, if indeed they were thinking, they committed to coming to a major city, not figuring the emergence and growth of arguably the most widespread, impactful protest movement the United States had seen in perhaps 80 years: Occupy Wall Street. And while it may have been the Lakeshore Drive protest that may have played a role in chasing away the 2004 G8 summit, the Chicago corporate media were amplifying echoes of another protest in Chicago history, that of the 1968 Democratic National Convention, and playing up the possibility that the G8 in 2012 could be another DNC in 1968. In their coverage of the build-up to the G8, the Chicago corporate media followed the progress of Chicago activists organizing and speaking out against the G8, providing a rare, widespread forum for grassroots voices. And then, in an abrupt move, the G8 announced on March 5, 2012, that the G8 summit would be moved away from Chicago to be held instead in the exclusive presidential retreat of Camp David, Maryland. The White House stated that the G8 sought a, quote, more casual backdrop, unquote, to help focus on serious issues, presumably away from what could be a tumultuous scene nearby. And with a presidential election looming in 2012, Barack Obama wouldn't want to be another Lyndon Johnson, a one-term president blotted by a major protest. Whatever the actual reasons, Chicago activists quickly claimed victory for pressuring the move, and vowed to continue organizing and speaking out against NATO, which would still meet in Chicago in May 2012. Confirmation of this may never come, but the reactions of the G8 to consistent and successful public protest strongly implies the power that grassroots organizing has. It can even force the move of the most powerful heads of state in the world's biggest economies to scramble not once, but twice.
Hey yo people, this is outrageous from Nacho. We got a question for G8. Why do they want to suffer, man? Let's go, listen to the question, man. Okay. G8, we got